In 1976, a television crew was filming inside an old amusement park in Long Beach, California. Inside a dark funhouse, hanging from the ceiling, was what appeared to be a life-sized mannequin. It had been there for years. Nobody seemed to think much of it. Then a crew member reached up and grabbed the figure. Part of it broke. What they found inside wasn't plaster, it wasn't rubber, it wasn't plastic. It was human bone. The discovery was shocking enough on its own, but what made it even stranger was the age of the body. The man had been dead for roughly 65 years, and somehow his remains had ended up hanging inside an amusement park in California. His name was Elmer McCurdy. He had been an outlaw in Oklahoma. He had died in 1911, and somehow the strangest chapter of his life was waiting for him after death. To understand how a dead outlaw ended up inside a California funhouse, we have to go back to Oklahoma in the early 20th century. Elmer McCurdy was born in 1880. Before becoming an outlaw, his life was relatively ordinary. He worked as a plumber and served in the United States Army. But eventually, McCurdy turned toward crime. He became involved in robberies across Oklahoma and neighboring states and developed a reputation as a train and bank robber. He was also fascinated by explosives. McCurdy believed he could become a successful outlaw, but the reality was far less impressive than the legend that would eventually surround his name. In October of 1911, McCurdy and several accomplices planned to rob a train near Okesa, Oklahoma. They believed the train would be carrying a large amount of money, but when they stopped the train and forced their way into the express car, they discovered that the fortune they expected wasn't there. The robbery was almost a complete failure. According to historical accounts, McCurdy's share amounted to only a few dollars. It was hardly the kind of payday he'd imagined. But the robbery had exposed him. Lawmen began searching for McCurdy and eventually tracked him to a ranch near Bartlesville, Oklahoma. On October 7, 1911, a shootout took place. McCurdy was killed. He was 31 years old. At that moment, nobody immediately came forward to claim his body. His remains were taken to a funeral home in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, where Undertaker Joseph Johnson prepared the body. Johnson preserved McCurdy using an embalming process that included arsenic-based preservatives. And then, something unusual happened. People started coming to see the dead outlaw. McCurdy had become a curiosity. Visitors reportedly paid a small fee to view his body. The funeral home had turned the remains of a dead criminal into an attraction. For a time, the unclaimed outlaw was generating money, even though he was no longer alive. But McCurdy's strange afterlife was only beginning. In 1916, two men arrived at the funeral home claiming to be McCurdy's brothers. They said they had come to take his body home, but they weren't his brothers. They were carnival promoters. They took McCurdy's preserved remains and put them on the road. And this was the beginning of a journey that would last for decades. The dead outlaw became a sideshow attraction. His preserved body was displayed to crowds who came to see unusual and sometimes disturbing curiosities. People photographed him, people paid to see him. And as the years passed, McCurdy's remains moved from one attraction to another. The strange thing was that the world around him kept changing. When McCurdy died, America was still largely a world of horses, steam trains, wooden towns, and dirt roads. But the decades that followed brought automobiles, highways, airplanes, radio, television, and an entirely different America. McCurdy's body somehow traveled through all of it. The man himself was forgotten, but his body kept appearing. Eventually, the preserved remains were connected to museums, crime exhibits, sideshows, and entertainment productions. At some point, the distinction between a real human being and an attraction had almost completely disappeared. To many people who saw him, he was simply a strange figure from the past, a preserved outlaw, a curiosity from another era. Few could have imagined that the body had belonged to a real man who had died in Oklahoma more than half a century earlier. Then came 1976. McCurdy's remains had eventually ended up at the Pike Amusement Park in Long Beach, California. Inside the Laugh-in-the-Dark funhouse, the body was hanging as part of the attraction. By then, nobody working there understood what it really was. During filming for the television series The $6 Million Man, a crew member needed to move what everyone believed was a mannequin. But when the figure was handled, part of it broke. And suddenly, the illusion disappeared. What was inside was unmistakably human. Authorities were called.